So greetings from the cold, snowy, midwinter woods of Pennsylvania. Perfect setting for today's little tale, the legend of the Wendigo. So this tale is of a Native American origin, primarily what's called the Algonquin-speaking people in the northeastern United States, around the Great Lakes area. And it is a tale for this time of year, during these harsh winter months, cold and often hungry months for people living during that time, you know, in pre-colonial days and even in earlier colonial times. Midwinter could be a tough time. And that's when the Wendigo showed up. We'll talk about what he looked like in a little bit. That's something you want to meet out here. So the creature is described as being gaunt and emaciated looking, with ashen gray skin, almost sickly looking, and the skin tightly pulled over the bones. As you can see, its rib cage and its skull, its eyes are like sunken inside the skull. Some descriptions show it with almost like a deer skull on top with antlers. Some show it with a more human skull. Very slender, sometimes very tall, up to 15 feet tall. Just lurking off in the snowy woods, searching for its next victim to eat. And the Wendigo, it ate people. With an insatiable appetite, it ate people. Apparently, even after it ate, it was never satisfied. Insatiable greed. Always hungry, always searching. I'm just kind of looking around. I know there's no Wendigo out here, but I'm just looking. There's different theories out there as to what a Wendigo actually was. Was it an actual person that got changed into that sort of creature, or was it just some kind of a spirit being, or was it a combination of both? Was it a human that got possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo? And the idea that a Wendigo was once a human seems to be the most common concept for this creature. What exactly would cause a human to become a Wendigo? Well, in these harsh winter months, when there wasn't much around to eat, there was the temptation to eat sometimes the only available thing, and that was eat someone else in your tribe. And cannibalism. And the idea was that this cannibalism is what turned folks into a Wendigo. Or other acts such as greed and murder, other things that are cultural taboos. If someone engaged in those items or those things, they were in danger of becoming a Wendigo. And as with many of these types of legends, there's differing views on the creature as far as to how fast it could go. Some legends say that the Wendigo was extremely swift and agile, could move at super fast speeds. Some sources say that it was more slow and sluggish as it went through the woods. But irregardless, it was a scary tale to tell people. And one of the even creepier things about it is that it could mimic a human voice. Like if you were like me, say if there was a Wendigo out here and it wanted to eat me, it would mimic maybe like a small child's voice, or maybe a woman's voice that was in trouble, and it would lure me into the woods. I'd hear the voice and wonder, what's out there? Maybe someone needs help, and it would just keep luring me further and further off trail into the woods where it would attack and then eat me. So that's one way it would lure people away from the village and out into the woods. Or if you were like a hunter, like walking on a trail like this, it could get you off trail and into the woods. A Wendigo is also often blamed for the disappearance of people. Someone left the village, this time of year never came back, is often blamed on a Wendigo. Probably even someone from their own village. Some stories say that the Wendigo could retain its human look, and then kind of change into one when it was out in the woods. So there might be someone living in your village who was one and you wouldn't even know it. And it's also said that they gave off an odor of decay. So if you're walking in the winter woods and you smelled the scent of something rotten, there might be one around. Especially if you hear that voice calling to you in the woods and you have there's that smell in the air. You might just want to go home and not meet one. And oddly enough, there's even a mental psychosis named after this. It's called the Wendigo psychosis. It deals with people who eat other people, cannibalism. I think back in 1879, there was a Native American who, how shall you say it, ate his whole family. And he tried to blame it on that psychosis, like he had a mental disorder. Wendigo psychosis, I think it's called. But they didn't believe him. He was convicted anyway. But it's an actual thing in some circles. And whether or not you believe in the Wendigo, or whether the Native Americans did or not, there is a lesson behind the legend. You know, back in those times, like I said, this was a very difficult time of year to live. And you needed to work together. There needed to be cooperation to make things happen. You had to share what little food was around. So the Wendigo was a lesson, was a warning against things like murder and greed and cannibalism. It was warning you that if you engaged in such things during these hard times that you would turn into this monster. It was a way of encouraging people to not engage in those culturally taboo things, if you want to call it that. So there was a lesson behind it. You know, if you don't share what little food is left, or cooperate with because you had to cooperate, hunting and cooking, all that was a tribe effort, or even in like colonial times, you had to work together as a village so everybody had enough. You had to work together. It was a lesson against being that person that went off in the woods by himself, maybe preyed off the villagers, stole from them at night, took their food, or the occasional individual who would resort to eating people. It was a lesson against that kind of stuff. You would turn into the Wendigo. And in a way, that lesson is true. If you do engage in greed and murder and cannibalism, in a way, you are a monster. It's not entirely untrue. I mean, you don't turn into like a Wendigo creature, but you get to that point in your life, you have become a monster, at least mentally. All right, well, Wendigos are not in these woods. It is a beautiful winter day. Not terribly cold. This is still that snow from the big snowstorm we had at the beginning of February. It also makes for a good story to keep, wandering children at home. Telling them tales of the Wendigo that's out in the woods waiting for them. And you can go online and learn a little bit more about the Wendigo yourself and see some of the different pictures or depictions of what it looks like. It's what, like I said, there's differing ideas of what it looks like. They're all kind of, basically some creepy looking thing out in the woods, gaunt and emaciated, skull-like thing. And it has been featured on some television shows. I think the one show was Supernatural. I think the very first episode, or maybe the second episode. I started watching that series. I should probably pick it up again. But they featured a Wendigo in the one episode. I think they were up in Minnesota somewhere. I think they pronounced it different. I think they called it the Wendigo. Like I said, there's a million different names to pronounce it and spell it, depending on which site you go to. But it's a very interesting story. And there are tales that, like I said, all around the Great Lakes regions and in the northern forest, even down into Pennsylvania, you'll find a few legends of it, and even in modern times, there's people saying that they saw one, running across the road or something like that. I've never seen one, and I don't plan on ever seeing one, so at least I hope not. All right. I would imagine it would make a good campfire story. If you were camping, like in the wintertime with somebody, you know, and they had food that you wanted. You know, you probably have your own food, but maybe their food is yummier than yours. You could tell them about the tale of the Wendigo and warn them of greed and keeping food to themselves. That they'll either turn into one or be eaten by one. Or you can tell it to kids, just to scare the kids. You can tell them it's not true then as well. All right. It is one of those interesting legends, you know, mythical creatures. I love these stories about mythical creatures out in the woods. I think last fall I told you the legend of the squonk. Today it's the Wendigo. Alright, we're gonna start heading back. It was a nice day just to come out for a little walk. Some of you might recognize this place. This is Blue Marsh here in Berks County, Pennsylvania. I often come here. That's the lake out there. It's frozen, although I do see some open water way out there. So if you find yourself out in the snowy woods this winter, you might want to keep an eye out for the Wendigo. If you smell something rotting, or if you hear a voice calling to you from the depths of the woods, you might want to go the other way. Unless you want to be eaten. Alright. Thanks for coming along, and I'll see you around on the next adventure.